Hey folks, this is Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson. On today's episode of Tennessee Today, I had the privilege of interviewing Arthur Herman, the author of this book, Founders Fire. It's a book about the characteristics of individuals who essentially do great things and have changed America in different ways. We talk about how that Founders Fire actually applies to things that are going on in Tennessee right now, like quantum computing, our investment in nuclear technology, the growth of our cities. I think it's a really interesting conversation that I think you'll find interesting. So I hope you'll tune in. Do you ever wonder what's really going on in government, locally, in the state of Tennessee and across the country? I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson, and on Tennessee Today, we dive into the issues that shape our communities from local policy to national debates. Each episode, I break down key topics and issues, share my perspective from over 20 years in the Tennessee legislature, and talk with guests about the decisions that impact your daily life. I hope you enjoy these honest conversations and that they help you stay informed and engaged. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Tennessee Today wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Arthur, welcome to Tennessee Today.
Great. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, let's start with the important stuff. I was looking through your bio, and I see where you taught on the Rock, which for those on the inside, yay, Swanee's right. You taught at the University of the South in Swanee.
I did. That was in the late '80s. I was there from '86 through '88.
So I'm going to shock you here. I was a Purple Tiger in 1980-81. I played football up at Swanee and wrestled up at Swanee back in the very early 80s. But I grew up and lived in the Chattanooga area. And after about a year up there, I realized it was very similar to the high school that I'd gone to. I went to a school here in Chattanooga called Baylor School. And so I transferred back to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and that's where I ended up getting my degree. But I'm very familiar with the University of the South.
Yeah, well, everyone would tell me when I was there, they would sort of say, this place has just not been the same since Bo Watson was up here.
It's true. It's very true.
Making things happen, and bringing life and joy to every soul up here on the Rock.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, Arthur,
it's an isolated. Let's put it this way: it's an isolated life, dedicated and focused on learning, not on sort of the larger social agenda you get in a town, even one the size of a Chattanooga, let alone a Knoxville.
Yeah,
or Nashville.
That's very true. And let me say about the University of the South that whether you attended for 4 years or 6 years or 4 days, they include you in their alumni association and they reach out to you to contribute whenever they can to
whenever they get a
cause.
shot at you. That's right. But anyway, so I became a big fan of Tennessee as a result of that. And although I have not had a chance to go back much, and I know in the last few years, last decade or so, Nashville's become very hot. I know people who have, fled California and fled New York to move to Nashville and so on. But myself, the city that I think is going to be next best thing, and I'm curious to know what you think, Bo. I think the next city that's going to be the next best thing in Tennessee is Knoxville. I think Knoxville is way underrated as both as a place to live, but also as a growing center for this whole reindustrialized, reshoring movement that's coming across America. Knoxville's in great shape to be part of that.
Well, of course, my friends here in Chattanooga would not like that answer, but I think I've hit on something in terms of our state's investment in the nuclear industry.
That's right.
The federal government's investment in the national lab at Oak Ridge, and also their investment at Huntsville, where they'll be moving. I think the headquarters of Space Force is going to be moving
Yes,
to
they
Huntsville,
are.
Alabama. And the development of Quantum, which is a really big project here in Chattanooga. Chattanooga sits right in between those two big federal investments, both Huntsville and Oak Ridge. And I think that's going to bode well for Chattanooga. But I think you're right. The amount of investment that's going into the nuclear area up in and around Knoxville is going to attract a lot of people.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned the quantum, because I worked a lot on quantum technology, both quantum computing and quantum security, when I was at my previous think tank. And I got to know a couple of the companies and people involved in the Chattanooga effort there. It's very impressive. And I think the spillover from the expertise at Oak Ridge and so on bodes very well for the entire state, but also for the ecosystem and Chattanooga. I think Tennessee is going to be one of the big new hubs for the people I talk about in my book, the founders, and founders and entrepreneurs of companies and small businesses that will grow big and have enormous opportunities, especially in high tech. Tennessee is where it's going to be at.
Yeah, well, and that's a great segue into talking about your book and your thesis of the book about founders and the difference between people who are founders and people who are managers. The inspiration from your book came from an essay that you wrote almost a year ago to the month for the Wall Street Journal. Just for the folks that are and I tried to the best of my ability, Arthur, to talk about things from a local and state perspective, because there's all kinds of voices out there talking about what's going on in the federal government and all of that. And so I try to focus on what we're doing here in Tennessee, what we're doing here in East Tennessee. And I thought your book really did fit perfectly in with a lot of things that are happening in Tennessee when it comes to people sort of breaking the mold and being disruptive, new technologies coming in. So if you'll tell folks about how you were inspired to write the book, and then we'll talk about some of the things that I found interesting in your book.
Well, the book really was a confluence of a couple of things that I had written before. You mentioned one of them was an essay where I would on why it was that Elon Musk and Donald Trump seemed to get along so well. Remember, there was almost this kind of bromance relationship, and the media was completely puzzled, didn't understand it. Here's two different generations, after all. You know, Trump, a man approaching 80, and then you've got Elon Musk in prime of life. And involved in electric cars and space, and what could be the link up between them. And what I argued in that piece, and I talk about this in the book in more detail and in a broader perspective, is that they are both have that founder mentality that people have now, particularly in business schools and in discussion about what it is that makes for the most successful entrepreneurs, that this mindset, which they talk about as the founder mindset, the founder mentality, is one that brings together a cluster of characteristics that people use and set in motion in order to create a business and then to grow it and to raise it to a level of success that other people are simply astonished by and amazed at the way in which this takes place. So everybody knows about the role of entrepreneurs and how important they are in creating small businesses and helping to sort of drive the wheels of economic growth. But there's a big difference between the entrepreneur who, let's say, sets up a bodega and someone who really has that founder vision and the founder drive, but also that founder tolerance for risk that propels them into moving in sometimes completely unknown directions in terms of their business, in terms of their lives, in terms of the institutions and enterprises that they create. And so what I saw, Bo, was enormous similarities and affinities between the founder mentality in the business world that men like Musk and Donald Trump and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs have demonstrated in their careers. And our original founders, original founding fathers, who 250 years ago brought those same qualities to bear when they were thinking about founding a new nation and creating something that hadn't existed before, and in ways that many ways didn't think it was going to have a chance.
Yeah, Arthur, do you think that, because in reading your book, it seems like every founder has a competitive rival. Is that part of the, I mean, Edison had a rival, Lincoln had rivals, the founding fathers, if we use those, they had rivals that were either the Tories or were, just England itself. Musk and Trump work together, but you kind of see them as rivals. Your chapter on basically the Gilded Age, all those guys were they were doing different things, but they were all kind of Gates and Jobs. I mean, does a founder need a rival?
I think what it is that you have the founder mindset is one that is dedicated to a vision and a drive towards that vision that is impatient with any kind of an opposition or anyone who seems to be an obstacle or gets in the way with fulfilling that vision and that direction. And so you get a couple of those egos competing against each other in an arena, whether it's in the space industry, computer industry, and politics, and you're going to find friction. There's going to be friction. And that's very much different from the other mindset that I talk about in the book, which is more kind of the manager mindset, who sees conflict and sees competition as something to be smoothed over and to be negotiated out of in any kind of a way that avoids head-on confrontations or involves some sort of big blow-up in the process. And so when Musk and Trump had their big blow-up, you remember what that was like. And again, the media was all agog and shocked about it. Well, founders don't always get along well with other founders. And yet what happened is that eventually, especially after Charlie Kirk's assassination, they came together again, because they saw that common mission together and realized that there was something that did, in fact, draw them together, however different their egos were in terms of the conflicts that arose.
Yeah. So let me take your thesis about founders and the characteristics that they have, and I do think that competition between founders is a healthy thing, because each one is racing the other to get to whatever point before the other one gets there. And I think
absolutely right. Totally right.
And I think that drives sort of creative innovation in people that have that skill set. But let me stretch you a little bit and talk about this from a bigger perspective. Every year or every 2 years, the legislature will begin a new session. So essentially, it's a new day for government in Tennessee. So in January of 2027, a new legislative body will be sworn in, and it's a brand new legislative session. This year, we will have a new governor. One of those candidates for governor is saying, it's a time to reset in Tennessee, that we've been on a really good run, but we don't need to get comfortable where we are, and it's time to reset. How does your thesis on founders, how can that be applied to a larger body, like an institution like the General Assembly in Tennessee, where we challenge the status quo in terms of the entire state, rather than just in a single enterprise like that?
Right. I think that's also been characteristic in American history. And I think if you look at the course of American history, and what I wanted to do in this book, Founders Fire, was to give really a very fresh approach to understanding American history as punctuated by these moments when the founder mentality comes through, not just in business, or even in the realm of invention and discovery, like an Edison, or a Steve Jobs. But we can see it operating also in the larger sphere, just as you were saying, in governments, in education, in a range of religious movements as well. And what happens, I think, where you see that founder instinct coming forward, Bo, where that happens is when you get someone in government who comes in and who says, not how can we do this better, but why are we doing this at all? In other words, let's go back to the basics and rethink, as you use the term, reset our priorities and our ways of operating so we can get back to the original principles that set us here in the first place. And if you look at the course of American history, you see those moments arising where key figures, key leaders in our history will look back to the Declaration of Independence or look back to the Constitution and discover there principles, basic principles that need to be brought forward once again, a kind of refounding of the nation. The classic example of this, and one who's very important, of course, in my book, is Abraham Lincoln, and the way in which he understood that principle buried in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, was not being fulfilled in a country that was half free and half slave, that it had to be a country that was all free, and that by doing so and by creating such a nation, it would become possible to rediscover and return to those basic principles. And I think in a lot of ways, what we're seeing right now in the course of our government at the national level as well as state levels is governors, presidents, who are thinking about how do we get back to why we're here in the first place, why it is that America is the freest society on earth and it always has been. And how do we get back to that? And how do we refound our governance and our models for governance in a way in which to fill that process? So it happens, and it can happen in a state legislature like that of Tennessee, at a governor's behest. But it's happened at the national level at key moments in the course of our history.
So let me I need to level set just for a second. When you're talking about a founder, does that mean a person who I get the idea that they're innovative, they're disruptive and all those kind of things, but there are a lot of people who started an idea, founded the idea, but just weren't successful. It just didn't work. I mean, in particularly if you use American history as an example, people were talking about some of the things that our founding fathers did long before they were able to actually make it happen. Is a founder the one that is successful at making the change, or can a founder just be the person who sort of germinated the whole idea in the first place? What's your definition of a founder?
I think it can be both. What I would say is though one of the key characteristics about the founder personality in business and government, in institutions and education, is that they are not foiled by failure. They learn from their failures. And so what you'll see is that when they set out to create a business or to create a political campaign, and they fail, and sometimes fail really badly, that the result is they don't sort of say, well, I guess I'm done with that. It's time for me to go and earn my accountant's degree, and go and work and earn a steady living, for myself and my family. What happens is that they say, okay, I learned what doesn't work. Now I'm going to push ahead and find out what does work for me and what it is that I can bring to my customers, to my constituents, to humanity in ways that defy that. And I think the classic example I'll point to, Bo, real fast, is Henry Ford. The number of times that he tried to launch a business based on building a combustion engine automobile, it was one failure after another, one bankruptcy and one being faced with enormous debts. But each time He regrouped and tried again. That's your founder.
Yeah. So I was thinking of the pair I was thinking of, I think it was Edison and Tesla,
Yeah.
because they were both working on the same track. They were both kind of doing the same thing, but we sort of give Edison the credit for being the founder, where really Tesla was actually doing the same thing, maybe a little bit ahead of Edison. Edison just got there at the end.
A fountain of ideas, right? An enormous fountain of ideas. And who found another founder, a different founder, George Westinghouse, and found a way in which to take his ideas and mobilize them in order to create the electrical system for electrical power in ways that Edison couldn't see. I mean, isn't that classic, though? Just goes right to it, right? Edison saw in Tesla competition, a rival. And he did his best basically to force him out of the company because it was just too much. He couldn't deal with all of that. Westinghouse had the insight to realize this is a guy with enormous ideas, Nikola Tesla, but who doesn't have that kind of single-minded drive to push and to persist and to drive himself through whatever obstacles and difficulties he faces. So I'll pick him up, I'll add him to my team, and he'll become loyal to me and part of my enterprise and part of my vision. That's another aspect of founders, too. If you look through history, is they tend to build around them a loyal team, a small group of select men and women who share the same vision and who are committed just as much as the founder is to getting it done and to pushing it forward into the future. And that's also a sign, by the way, I think, of a successful founder is they realize they can't operate on their own in isolation. They need other people, but they need a team who are as loyal to them and to their vision as they are competent in being able to perform the tasks that are necessary to see the mission through.
So when we're talking about and kind of pivoting towards the political, governmental sides of things, if we were to look at the public at large, do you think that the public prefers a manager or a founder?
I think that it's a really interesting question. And here's the way I'm going to answer it. I think on a day-to-day basis, most people prefer the manager because the manager is there to smooth over difficulties. He's there to sort of make sure things are running smoothly. Founders tend to be disruptive of other people's lives and peace and security because they have this vision and they're going to push that forward. So I think what happens is, Bo, throughout history, think about this, is that if you look at it, that in the present, we admire the managers and are frustrated and have problems and criticism, lots of it, of the founders. But when we look back, we tend to admire the founders because we see that their vision was really important, that something really intrinsically new and different and better was coming from the work that they were doing. And we tend to deprecate and sort of say about the managers in the past, why did you keep getting in his way? Why did you make it so difficult for him when he had this vision to go forward? You think I'm right?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really interesting concept that we're talking about here because I think the managers in political language would be the status quo, the people
right.
who are the establishment, who keep the trains running on time, keep the roads paved, that kind of thing. And the public, typically in our current political space, the public wants to reject the establishment, wants to reject the management style, but yet when you bring in the founder or the disruptor, and they find that it disrupts their way of life, they're not as fond of it as they thought they might would be.
That's right. It wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be.
Right. You think of, for example, the DOGE, the department that Trump created, that he put Musk in front of, who was supposed to make all these reductions to government spending and government programs and such. And that was applauded at the beginning until people start feeling the pain of that disruption. Then all of a sudden, they're not quite as happy. I guess that's true for anyone that's a disruptor or that's a founder. That's going to be their
also,
experience.
I think we also have to make another distinction here too, Bo. It's important, and that is the difference between the founder and disruptors. I mean, there are, particularly in politics, as you know, people who are disruptors and who present themselves as being founders in the sense of, I got this great vision and we're going to move the world forward in this kind of direction. But what happens is that they're not builders. And I think the relationship, one of the things, and I talk about this in the book, that's so positive characteristic of the founder is they're looking to build something better. And so their vision and their drive and energy is directed towards making new things and creating new things as much as it is tearing down or demolishing or sweeping aside what came before.
That's a really good point that I hope people heard, that people who are founders are adding value to a current circumstance, whereas disruptors often are there just to tear it down or destroy it. Now, sometimes disruptors can obviously lead to positive outcomes, but there is a different mindset between the two, the person who's trying to add value versus the person who is just trying to disrupt the status quo.
That's right. And you can see in the course of our American history, too, there are some figures. I point out one who's Tennessee favorite son, who I talk about in the book in this light, and that's Andrew Jackson. I think Andrew Jackson had a lot of the characteristics that we expect of founders. He's someone who had this bias towards action. That's one of the things about founders, too. They don't sit on their hands. We're not just going to talk about the problem. We're going to deal with it. We're going to act on it in this kind of way. He had that energy, that incredible energy that drove him and that really sort of made him a driven person about in government and in reshaping American government. But at the same time, I think the thing that you notice about Jackson is that he enjoyed the fight more than he enjoyed winning. Or of building something new and goes beyond it. He was someone who was, I think, in the end, didn't have the kind of vision that a rival like Henry Clay of Kentucky. To me, Henry Clay is a man with vision. He saw an American system in terms of the growth of tariffs, in terms of the growth of infrastructure, and the big changes that could bring America and America's frontiers together into the foundation for a future America. Clay had enormous vision. Jackson did not. He was content to knock things down and to admire the rubble. More than he was willing to really step up and sort of say, this is my vision for America, and this is where we're going to go with it.
Yeah.
And you find these in politics all the time.
Yeah, no, you do. And of course, Clay, that's an interesting one that you bring up because, yes, Clay was absolutely Jackson's rival. As a matter of fact, I think there's either truth or legend that they asked Jackson on his deathbed if he had any regrets, and he said he had two regrets. One, he did not hang Calhoun, and he did not shoot Clay. So certainly he had
that story. I can believe that story.
Yeah. So he had, and of course he was an individual that when he made a threat, he typically followed through with it.
He did. He killed his man. He knew how to do it.
But Clay was also known as a compromiser. Which kind of puts him in that little bit in the he had vision, but it kind of puts him in the management class because he was sort of trying to keep things moving forward, but at the same time recognizing I got to kind of deal with the present as we move forward versus like a Lincoln who just kind of had a completely new vision for the country and was able to execute it.
And I think that's a really important point that you just raised. Because, of course, there was no one that Lincoln admired more than Henry Clay. he really saw him in many ways as his model for how the transition from the Whig Party that Clay had really represented and led for all those decades to the Republican Party and what its vision was going to be. And a lot of it carried over. I mean, Lincoln's idea about a transcontinental railroad is very much part of that Clay, infrastructure drawing America together kind of vision. And at the very beginning, I think Lincoln, with regard to slavery, was prepared to make a compromise. We're not going to expand slavery to the West, but the slave states, if you want to keep it, we're not going to disturb it. They're the ones who provided the opportunity through secession and firing on Fort Sumter. They provided the opportunity where Lincoln could move decisively from being a kind of moderate compromise position as president to saying, no, we're going to deal with this situation once and for all by military force if necessary, and by getting rid of slavery as the great stain on American history and American character once and for all.
What separates a founder from an opportunist?
Well, I think it goes to one of the questions we just asked, doesn't it? The opportunist sees an opportunity as a way to make some money, get elected to office, right? To gain some notoriety, get your 15 minutes of fame, right? And there's the moment in which I can grab it and I make the most of it, maximize it. And then when it's done, it's done. The founder has an itch. The founder has a constant, persistent itch. Things have got to move faster. There's got to be a better way in which to do this, a better product, a better way for us to get back to our original principles as a nation, as a people. And it's that sort of instinct and urge forward that makes them restless and makes them, again, kind of not always an easy person to live with, or an easy person to share as business partner in an enterprise. When you thought we were just going to be here to make a lot of money, what you want to do is change the world.
So we've talked about a lot of people from the past, which is great, and we talked about a few people from the present, which is like Trump and Elon Musk. How about on the horizon? Do you see any people, or do they just kind of pop up? But do you see people out there who are starting kind of move into the founder's role, particularly, I would think, in the technology space?
My own feeling is, I would say, basically, there's three areas where you're going to see founders who are probably working in their basements or garages right now, maybe in their parents' basement right now, who are going to emerge tremendously as key movers and doers in the future. Where I see the next big breakthrough in AI actually is in the data center design, in ways that break that logjam or bottleneck that we're experiencing right now and looking ahead to, which is building these enormous data centers in order to run the power that AI demands in order to do the kinds of amazing things that it does. And as that power generation grows, the numbers of data centers that spring up around the country are going to proliferate. They're going to spring up like mushrooms all over the place, and not necessarily to everybody's satisfaction or happy. We're already seeing that. I live in Virginia, and you already have efforts on local communities on moratoriums for building new data centers because they're just taking over the landscape. My guess is that we're going to see these are going to be the equivalent of the ENIAC of computers, and that we're going to end up with data centers which are much more energy efficient and run much cooler, that are mobile, that are nuclear powered, even in ways that will completely reshape the landscape in ways that will happen. So AI is one area. We talked about at the beginning another area, and that's quantum computing, quantum sensing in that area. Here too, we're just on the cusp of the big breakthroughs that come in that area. The third one I'll look forward to, which I think will continue to expand in amazing ways, thanks to the other two technologies, AI and quantum, is going to be in biotech. in biotech and medicine. You're going to see enormous breakthroughs that are going to be coming there in ways that we just can't even imagine in 5 years' time. But what I'm going to say is this, and here I think we have to give a debt of gratitude, recognize a debt of gratitude to our founding fathers. Because one of the most important gifts that they gave us, and I talk about this in the Founders Fire, one of the most important gifts that they gave us as a new nation was the creation of the Patent Office. From the very beginning, the first article of the U.S. Constitution, Section 8, establishes the right of inventors and discoverers and scientists to own their own intellectual property. It is the only place in the Constitution, apart from the Bill of Rights, in which the word right is actually used in the language and in the text here too. We're the only nation on earth which has established that as part of our basic political structure. That what you invent, what you create, what you discover, that's yours. It's yours to do with what you want. The government can't take it away from you. Mega corporations can't claim it as their own. It's yours. It's yours to found your own business, to create your own enterprise, to sell to a business if you want to, or to a corporation if you want to, or use it lend it to the government for research they're doing on national security or on space, whatever. But that right, that intrinsic right, means that you have a power in the patent world of the patent discoveries, to unleash what Abraham Lincoln, who was a patent holder himself, called the fire of genius. That is this endless fountain of creativity, of innovation that comes out of America, and comes out of American labs, and comes out of American universities and businesses and people's basements and garages. And that's going to guarantee, I believe, Bo, that we are going to be a nation of founders, and a nation of founders that are constantly renewing our economy, our society, our culture in ways that gives me a lot of confidence about where we go in the future.
Well, I don't think there's any more to say after that. I mean, that's an awesome close. This has been a fascinating conversation. A little bit academic at times, but really, really good conversation. Your book is really good. I would recommend it to anyone watching the show. Founders Fire. See, I got a copy of it right here. But it's a really good book. I appreciate you taking time to be on the show today. This has been another episode of Tennessee Today with Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I'm sure you did, because this has been a fascinating discussion, please take the time to subscribe or like. It helps the program to get out to more viewers. Also, take the time to comment. You can certainly comment on our website at bofortn.com. And we'll see you next time. This has been Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson.